Hey there. So, I'm here in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, just walking here with my friend George, and I thought we might have a conversation about this presidential candidate named Mike Gravel. He's running for president on the Democratic primary. He ran back in 2008. He was a senator from Alaska at one point, and he's quite an interesting guy. So, George, I'll pass it over to you. What do you make of Mike Gravel?
I like Mike. I think he's quite a man. I want to see him in that debate. They say he's a dinosaur. I think he's like a mighty T-Rex, and they're a bunch of little field mouse scurrying through the grass.
Okay.
I think you put him up there with Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg looks like his disobedient son, and he will discipline him properly.
Wow. Well, the funny thing about Mike Gravel, he's kind of like a blast from the past, because I guess, so he was a senator from Alaska in like 1970, 71, 72, and from what I understand, he read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. That was his kind of claim to fame, and there's like a clip of him standing before the Congress, kind of doing a filibuster, wiping the sweat from his brow, and it was kind of his moment of fame, as he's the guy who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. And in a way, you can kind of see it's a generational thing, right? He talks about the military-industrial complex. He and Tulsi Gabbard are the only presidential candidates on the Democratic side that are supporting Julian Assange at this point. And he very much, he's a big supporter of the Belt and Road Initiative. I know he went to Iran and he appeared on Press TV. He's an anti-war guy through and through. He's anti-war and he's for average people. And he kind of speaks for that, baby boomer who felt betrayed by the Vietnam War, felt like what they'd been told about the USA being a great country was a lie, don't trust the government. They would probably agree with Alex Jones on a lot, but not ideologically. They lean left, whereas Alex Jones leans into the whole libertarian, the USA is communist, restore the republic thing. These people, you know them, older baby boomer folks. Maybe a lot of them are out in California, and they buy into a lot of conspiracy theories and things like that. But at the same time, they're still left. They're not right wing. They're not. They're not conservative. You know what I'm saying?
They have different propositions about the world, but they live in the same world.
Yeah.
Discourse, the same cyberspace, the same paranoia, the same distrust.
And it's not about economics. With Sanders, it's about economics. It's about, the billionaires, the millionaires, and the billionaires, and their following is millennial. Whereas, Mike Gravel, he appeals to an older constituency that remember back when he was a senator from Alaska. And that one thing that people have pointed out is that even though he's much older than he was in 2008, and he is an old fellow, right? Isn't he like 88 or something?
88 years young.
Yeah, it's weird. He seems younger this time around than he did in 2008, because that seemed to be his downfall in 2008, is he seemed like an old man who was, kind of bitter. I remember, one of the debates, he was saying, he just came across as a very angry old man. And I think that, that this time around he almost seems like he's not as senile. Does that make sense?
I think so. Maybe the fault is in us somewhat because, to give example, he starred in an extraordinary cinematic trilogy.
Okay.
Rock, Fire, and now the culminating film Rock 2.0. And I feel like maybe we've caught up to him in some way.
Okay.
There's a kind of Eastern mysticism to this trilogy. And maybe there was still too much ego. If you think about the film Fire, which many of you have seen, He goes into the woods. You hear the ram's horn blow in the woods. He gathers the wood to burn the fire, and the fire burns for minutes on end.
Okay.
I think
creative campaign videos.
The ego crystallized, and he walked past it.
Right.
In the Eastern understanding. So he's there, he's a man, and he's just with the Tao, and he's going to act. And he wants to heal this country, and I think a lot of 13-year-olds are with that at this point.
Yeah, every so often during his 2008 campaign, there were moments where you just had to laugh. Like the one moment that sticks out is his Colbert interview in 2008. He's interviewed by Colbert, and he says in the interview, Colbert tells him he should change his name. Instead of Gravel, which sounds too French, he should be Gravel. And instead of being Mike, he should be Buzz, like Buzz Aldrin. He should be Buzz Gravel. Do you remember that?
I do, but I still think he always stole the show.
Right, and then the big one was when he talked about gays in the military, and Mike Gravel says, well, not only should we have homosexuality in the military, it should be encouraged. Do you remember this?
Isn't that the Mannerbund, that thing Julius Evola talks about?
Something like that,
the
yeah.
Aryans creating culture and fucking.
Something, and yeah, right. And he's talking about how basically we should promote it, and he goes back to like Plato and Socrates and ancient Greece, and that was a little bit weird. And again, he's anti-war, seems to be his thing. He's against war. He talks about big corporations. He's against the war on drugs. He wants to legalize drugs. And he seems to be very much, kind of your baby boomer anti-war conspiracy guy. And he has a big following, and his social media presence may not be as big as, like, say, Andrew Yang's or Tulsi Gabbard's, but that's because his constituency are not folks that are getting on Twitter and social media, I feel like he's got a lot of older folks who feel like the government lied to them, and, that's where he's at. He represents a constituency, that grandparent that a lot of people have who protested the Vietnam War or fought in Vietnam and found out the government lied to them or something like that. Does that make sense?
I think that's there. It's hard to quantify entirely what he represents to who.
Yeah.
It slices and dices kind of, there's a certain kind of like older Republican who's disenchanted who would go, that's the heart that I have in some way.
Well, and he seems like a nice guy. That's the big thing about him. He seems like kind of old, he seems kind of bitter, but he doesn't seem mean. He seems very happy, and he smiles a lot, right? He did a video, I remember at one point, with Red State Update. Do you remember this? It was Christmas time with Mike Gravel, and he says, I want peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And he's like, that's the best thing that anyone could want. Do you remember that? It was kind of a cute moment.
I actually think in some way he's the most Norman Rockwell of the bunch in terms of like
right.
He's picturesque.
Even though he's like really anti-war and wants to legalize, he seems a little more like down home, good-natured grandpa kind of,
No, if you're trying to be like a left kind, the Norman Rockwell thing that's a little bit left. And that, that exists during the Roosevelt administration.
Yeah.
You're going to be a bit unhinged in this time.
Right.
And it's just like, I think he's just kind of, the psychic energy he has is similar to a lot of people that are like maybe older and they're giving up on politics. But that's what they are.
Right. Well, the big line that everyone talks about is, he says when he first got to Congress, he wondered, how did I get here? And then he thought, how the hell did all these other people get here? He says after he left Congress, he dropped out of politics, and since then he was living under a rock and trying to stay away from it. But around the time of the Iraq War, he just had to get back involved because things were so bad and the government was so corrupt. That was Mike Gravel. That was who he was. He was, he lives in Virginia now, very far from Alaska, where he used to live, from what I understand, right? And then he seems a little eclectic. He wants to legalize drugs. He seems like kind of a socialist, kind of a lefty. But then he hangs out a little bit with Lyndon LaRouche. He did that, and he's hung out with the LaRouche PAC events. He also ran on the Libertarian ticket. Do you remember that? He tried to get the Libertarian nomination. Even though he favors, more regulations and raising taxes on the rich, he felt like he was the true libertarian, and he was like in the libertarian debates trying to get the nomination. Do you remember that?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's far-fetched in that, we put each other in these boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But we
have a seat here. Yeah.
I think we're finding out, like, there's new coalitions.
Yeah.
In some ways. So some of these people, 8 years could be 80 in our politics at this point.
Sure.
Before Obama, I think the attitudes were very different. That, like the joke he made about what are these people doing there, that was taken as somewhat not respectful.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't be that with post-Trump.
Right.
The kind of the illusion has dissipated.
Right. I mean, he's a remnant of the new left, trying to struggle with what's going on here, of the non-ideological new left, right? In the 60s, yes, you had your ideological Marxists, but you also had this current that was kind of like Carl Oglesby. Do you know the name Carl Oglesby?
I think I've heard it.
Yeah, he was a leader of Students for a Democratic Society, but he was never like an ideological Marxist. And he wrote a book called The Cowboy and, the Yankee and Cowboy War, it was called. And it was an analysis of the assassination of Kennedy, of the Vietnam War, of the Watergate scandal, trying to kind of track what was going on inside the American elite. But Carl Oglesby was never a Marxist. He was never an ideological one. He was just kind of like, the government is corrupt, they're lying to us, there's conspiracies going on, they killed King, they killed Kennedy. I believe Mike Gravel's into UFOs. That's one of his big things.
Some videos came up, and
yeah.
I mean, what's a UFO? Is it like an X-Files alien, or is it just somebody saw something and I don't know how to categorize
and,
it?
Jimmy Carter, when he was elected, that he kind of seemed to incarnate some of this too. Jimmy Carter, apparently said he believed in UFOs, and Jimmy Carter's election was seen as kind of a victory for the New Left. But again, not the ideological Marxist New Left, but the we don't trust the government, we smoke lots of weed, we think that the Vietnam War was a big fat lie, and we want to do our own thing and not trust the establishment man and not be all uptight and square, you know what I'm saying? That kind of wing of new leftism, that kind of 1960s contrarian stuff, that kind of thing. That's what I see a big streak of in Mike Gravel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think the context is interesting because at a certain point, some of those people I think do have a more concrete political potential at this point, where some of the people that we thought of as more formed in terms of the left may be less relevant.
Yeah.
Maybe more corrupt, maybe going the wrong path to a further extent.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I will say, he and Tulsi Gabbard stand alone on international issues, right? They're the only ones saying we should stop meddling in Syria, stop supporting he and Tulsi Gabbard seem to be the only ones that are putting up anything close to an anti-imperialist political line. I mean, Bernie Sanders is nowhere near there, and you talk to Biden and all of them, it just gets worse and worse, And they at least, Gabbard, says, we need to stop the wars, stop meddling in Venezuela, other places, and Gravel seems to do that as well. So I'll give him that. I will say seeing him on the stage with all of them is going to be interesting. Now, will they let him on the stage? Does he have enough people backing him to get on the stage?
I hope he gets it. It seems possible. I looked at his website. It seems, the standards they put for it, it seems like he could do it.
Yeah.
And they would be worth watching if he was in it.
Yeah, well, he'll make it more entertaining. Absolutely. I hope it works out. I hope he's on the stage, and I hope I get to watch him interact with the other ones. And he seems like he's genuine, like he believes what he's saying. He's not just trying to get elected, obviously. In fact, his chances are pretty slim, but he knows that. But he's running to make a statement. He represents a strata, a constituency, right? I mean, just like Tulsi Gabbard represents a constituency of her own. And that's what I'm starting to see with all these candidates, right? That there's a lot of these people running that we don't think are going to win, right? They're not really being celebrated by the media as actually going to win, but they all represent somebody within the Democratic Party that it's really important to get feeling like they're represented, Tulsi Gabbard, she's ex-military, she's Hindu, and she represents folks in the military who feel like, why are we fighting on behalf of the terrorists, right? Why are we attacking Assad when Assad is fighting Al-Qaeda? Why are we supporting the Saudis who are linked to 9/11? And people that are in the military that have actually looked into what we're doing in the Middle East and are like, wait a second, I'm fighting to fight against the people who did 9/11, and they're confused, right? And people that are just genuinely anti-war, that's Tulsi Gabbard, right? Whereas Gravel is, again, your older peacenik, but then, but there's other ones too, right? I mean, there's other candidates that I think represent different, constituencies that the Democratic Party has, people within the Democratic Party camp, people that are Democratic Party activists, that the point is to make them all feel like they've been heard on the stage. Does that make sense?
I think at this point there's a certain awareness that the coalition is fragile.
Yeah.
And that's an overarching theme of this period.
Yeah.
I mean, Gravel, in a way, it's a little different in that he's a candidate who has no ambition of winning at all. Gabbard is a 1,000,000 to 1, but it's still a contest. It feels like she's in it.
Yeah.
It's Gravel just wants to, take that big rock and throw it in the pond and create those ripples.
Right.
He doesn't want to seize the means of production, doesn't want to do something, but he wants to do something good. He wants to channel the force of the cosmos. And before he as an older man, will rejoin the cosmos in a different way.
Perhaps, yeah.